Barakatah Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. The water Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Barakatah, Barakatah, Barakatah. I want to give all praise, glory, and honor, of course, to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the nation of Israel, better known as Great Millstone. Salutations to all you sincere brothers as well. Quick lesson, kind of a follow-up of what I put up last night, um, where I went into, Edom, and basically how, they say that Edom's done away with, but then yet all these new Caucasian nations claim to be of the 12 tribes, and this guy here in particular claims that the French are the tribe of Reuben, and he says, you should watch the video if you got 7 minutes to spare, and he basically goes on to say that the French were notable and their dignity when it's talking about Reuben in Genesis the 49th chapter. He's trying to explain that it's because of like forks and knives today. That's like the dignity of French. And he goes on to tell another story of a young sailor who, instead of fleeing from a boat that was going down, he stayed his post and died with the boat. Which is, it's all bullshit. And they try to go into saying, oh, this French word meaning the Franks and this and that. So, but really, all these Edomites go back to the German people. Okay, and even before the German people, they go back to Edom. Okay, and that's the funny thing. Like the so-called white man, he's everybody. He's the Egyptians. He's the Romans, which he is the Romans. But he's the Chinese, the Japanese. He's everybody, right? And for him, he wants any and all identity except his own, except the mark of Cain that was put on him, which is leprosy. But the truth is, Jeremiah 10:16, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. See, we're the former of all things. The so-called white man, that's a new thing in the earth, to have no pigmentation. Every other nation has their pigmentation except the so-called white man. So coming back to these guys and dealing with him, I'm gonna play some of it.
We're talking about some of the European nations and their connections to the lost tribes. We talked about Zebulun and the Dutch. Element is in the French with that character, and was supposed to be until the ship blew up, and he was grandeur, who in a sense of duty, and the boy stood on the burning deck. Maybe by the time that poem, the boy stood on the burning deck, thing to do. There's a sense, and it's mentioned that in the scriptures, the excellency of dignity, and the sense of what is the right thing to do. There's a sense of him being the eldest and him.
Good quality.
Yes, yes. For example, we wouldn't eat with a knife and fork if it wasn't for the French. They set the standards in the French court. There's a sense of grandeur also in some of their histories. The boy stood on the burning. Do you remember that book, that poem, "The Boy Stood on the Burning Deck"? Maybe by the time you and I went to school, it had already. But during the whole of the 19th century, "The Boy Stood on the Burning Deck" was a classic, and that was about a French boy who in a sense of duty and grandeur and gallantry, he stood on that deck.
That's one of the points right there. You notice how he made reference to the fork and the knife, which that's bullshit. And then this guy in the black hat is Yair Davidi, or whatever you say his Yiddish, his Germanic name Um, he, basically, they start contradicting each other, but they're not in an agreement the whole time about it. Because he goes on to break down one word in particular that means both peasantry and like people of a court, and he's comparing the French to peasantry. He's how they're known, but then this guy's over here comparing the French to royalty, but then this guy's comparing them to peasantry. So it's like, well, which one is it? Is he dignity or is he not? So I'll get to that article in a second. So then, just look up Frank, which this is a new thing in the earth, man. The 1540s, 1300s, 1540s, Old French. That's a new thing in the earth. And really, the French comes from the Latin language, which that goes back to the Romans. Okay, so that's just basic scratching the surface. Going into the Germans, being a new thing as well, but the Germans go back to the time of Rome as well. So you kind of follow that little chain. But this is something right here that's that Edomites won't want to talk about, and the title is French court rules that native white French do not exist. Okay, in 2010, a rapper and sociologist joined forces to publish a book and CD, both titled "Fuck France." The General Alliance Against Racism and for the Respect of French and Christian Identity took them to criminal court in Paris and charged them with public insult and incitement to discrimination, hatred, or violence. See, so the minute you expose this devil as being the devil, now he puts you in jail. But he slandered us. He slandered our people, said we're Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians. He's renamed us and said things that we're not, but we can't do shit against him. That's the devil, man. Only the devil would do that shit. It says after 5 years, the court finally came to their verdict. It claimed that white people are not considered native to France under French law. So the two defendants could not be found guilty. So look at that. Now, how did that come to pass? Okay, because the truth is coming out. This all so-called white people are Edomites. Okay. Now you're gonna have some of our people that look um, like they're so-called Negroes, and they might be Edomites because of their lineage, because of their DNA, their lineage, the seed. That's why it talks about in the New Testament, seed as to one, not seed as to many. That's talking about lineage, or what they call today DNA. Okay. Um, the court said that native French as a group does not cover any reality, okay, legally, historically, biologically, or uh, sociologically. It ruled that whites, so-called whites, or the so-called white race, is in no way a legal component of the quality of the French. You see that? So these Edomites are saying, look, so-called white people, that's not a component of being French, especially native to the area. You, the so-called white man, is migrated around as a murderer, as a vagabond, as a fugitive and a vagabond. He's moved around. He's got that same spirit of Cain. And apparently, that native white French do not constitute a group of people, according to the 1881 Act on Freedom of the Press. Okay. Um, in this trial, we were pushed to consider the concept of anti-white racism, and the question was whether the white French represent a group defined by law, while American Indians, Australian Aborigines, or New Zealand's Maori are considered native to their respective places. Certain high-ranking officials do not consider white people native to Europe, or in fact anywhere on the planet. This is because native groups are entitled to special privileges under the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. You see this? So-called white people don't have, they're not granted this. Why? Because they moved around. Their real homeland is back there in the Caucasus Mountains, in Mount Seir, south of Judah, right? That's where they're supposed to be. Okay. According to this law, indigenous groups are encouraged to maintain and strengthen their own institutions, cultures, and traditions. It gives them a right to remain distinct and prohibits discrimination against them. Basically, it gives them the right to preserve their heritage. Okay, now why would they have to preserve their heritage, man? Why would they have to? Why would that be a thing in the earth? Why would that be a thing? Okay. Um, Job 27:13. This is the portion of a wicked man with the Most High, and the heritage of oppressors. That's the devil. The so-called white man is his heritage is of oppression, which they shall receive of the Almighty. When at the end, just like in Job, it talks about at the end. Um, and the end is when Obadiah speaks of these demons, okay, these Edomites getting their comeuppance. Okay, another was it like Micah, I think, or Malachi. Here you go, Micah 2:2. Okay, we'll start at verse 1. It says, "Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand." What's in the power of their hand? Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Okay, covered the faces of the judges thereof. Salakia. Salah. And covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? The so-called white man goes around with his iconoclasm. That's a thing they created, defacing other people's images and setting themselves up as indigenous peoples. Okay, and they covet fields, right? Look what they did in North America. Really, anywhere they've gone under the whether they call themselves Britain, French, Spaniards, whatever they called themselves. Okay, then take them by violence. How does the so-called white man get everything he possesses? By violence. And houses, what's also known as a house, a heritage, the house of Jacob, okay, the house of Judah, and take them away, so they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Going back to this article, basically, they came up with this declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples to preserve their heritage. This is not what anti-whites want Europeans to do. They want us to be eliminated from our own continent as well as colonial countries. They are trying to carry out this white genocide with mass non-white immigration from the third world and with diversity policies which white areas are singled out and forced to accept. Well, look, there is a white genocide coming. Okay, there's a white genocide coming, um, because you've invaded everywhere. The so-called white man has invaded everywhere. Okay, now this website is called White Genocide Project. Okay, um, so look, the nations that were at peace with thee have brought thee even to the border, and that's what when you bring in the ancient days you would go to the border when you wanted to go to war with somebody. Look at this. Nicaraguan woman loves the white guy, but feels guilty because he taints her body. That's true, man. See? So look, the jig is up. Okay, the so-called white man is Edom. With that, I'm gonna say shalom.